as well, but we're going to talk about some TP teachings and some why it's important that, my Kohkom passed down these teachings to all of her grandchildren and her children and now her great grandchildren. So that's what's on our agenda this evening. And if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat at any time and we'll try to answer them. For myself, my name is Jasmyn Albert. My dog just came in, 1 second. My name is Jasmyn Albert. I am Plains Cree and Métis. I've grown up in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan for most of my life. Shh, get down. And I'm a teacher and a mom, and I love sharing my culture. I love sharing what my Kohkom has taught me. And, she always told me that it was important to share, and so that's why we're here today. Want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Mary Lee, and I don't know what to say about myself. All I know is I'm always willing to talk and share and visit. I call it visiting. I call it teaching, because that's how I learned, by the old people, visiting the old people, and especially my mother. I worked beside her through the years, and when I was younger, I didn't know she was teaching me. There was always some story when we did things together, whether it was berry picking or sewing. There was always a story she had to share. So, and I guess those were the teachings that I share today with my grandchildren and my great grandchildren. And now, of course, I don't see those as much as I did my grandchildren. My grandchildren were always there, but my great grandchildren, and now it's a little different. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Even the dogs are glad to see me. I haven't been here for a while. So that's me. I still do my best to be out there for people when they will request, when they need a little bit of help somewhere. I do my best. I can only teach what I know, how I grew up. I can't teach anything else but that. But yeah. So we do our best. Storytelling is something I grew up in, because I didn't grow up with a TV or a radio. We had a radio, but it was only turned on maybe 10 minutes a day, and it was battery operated. It was not. I grew up with no power, no running water, so very different than today. And I'm glad I grew up that way. Luxuries were not there. Of course, you don't know that. We didn't know that. There were other people lived differently. Not too many people had luxuries them days. I grew up in the north, so absolutely you had to work together and be together. And the good times were when work was done, was time for sharing. Stories, lots of stories. The old people used to come and visit my parents, and my mother used to say, make sure you cut enough wood so the old people can tell stories, because we had to keep the fire going and keep them warm. Keep them with whatever food we had, and tea, of course, was something very huge them days, was offering the old people tea. So yeah, so that's how I grew up. And a lot of times after working hard in the cold all day, as soon as you got warm, you fell asleep. So I'm sure I missed a lot of stories. But nevertheless, the ones I remember, and it was usually the old men that told the stories more or less, and some of them told stories with the drum, they would drum a song, because the legends of Wisapich, we can say that now. We can use his name now, because if you use his name in the summertime, my mother used to say, it gets cold, you change the weather, because that's who he was. But the moral of his journey in our people was to teach us to not to do things the moral is he got into trouble a lot, and because of he told lies, he had a hard time telling the truth. And we know that today, you know, when you tell a lie, sooner or later it's going to come out, you know. And I guess that's just what the old people was teaching us young people at the time. Don't lie, because look what happened to Isakicha, okay? Look what happened to him. He was related to everything, every animal, he adopted, so he could get away and use them a lot of times in a negative way, you know. So that was the teaching. It was a teaching, and it was used in stories about him, and there are landmarks all through uh, uh, Turtle Island where he ventured. He left landmarks of the people he visited there. The last I went to Thunder Bay, there's an island there that looks like somebody laying on his back. And it's an island, but you look at it, it looks like a person laying on their back with their face up. And their story over there is was the last resting place we Sakichak. This was where he ended his journey. This was his resting place. That's their story over there, But here in Cutknife, there's a hill where he slid down, and there's bum mark. The old people, I never did go see that, but they say there's a bum mark where we Sakichak slid down. And then sometimes the people went there uh, to do ceremony and to do pipe ceremony, because that was his landmark here for us, was there. In different places. And why we see things the way they are, because he left a landmark even in the animals. Why some of our animals struggle in different ways, because that's because we Sakicha did something to them. So just like the loon has a hard time walking on land, You ever see them try and walk on? They're good in water, but on land they struggle to walk, because Sakichak one time, he was so hungry, and he called his brothers and sisters. He called them, all the feathered friends, come, I'm going to make a blind dance. So of course they all come. They always believed him, and he was drumming away. And they were coming in the teepee, and they're dancing around, and he would feel them and see how fat they were. And then he'd wring their necks, and put them aside. And then the loon opens his eyes, and he says, oh my God, Sakichak is killing us all. Make a run for it. So of course, everybody went going out the door, and the loon was the last one. Sakichak give him a kick in the bum, as he went out. That's why the loon has to struggle walking on land. And that was a story. That was a story. But these stories were long, You know, they always stretch the stories. So of course you're going to fall asleep. Sometimes it takes a couple of nights before I caught on to the first story. So yeah, those were, because winters were so harsh, sometimes those were brought out laughter in the people, that forget about the struggle, forget about the people getting sick. And the old people used to say, it's good when it's cold, because the sickness dies in the cold, That's what they used to say, you know. It's good when it's a cold winter, you know. Usually in January it's really cold, Yeah. So for me, it was how I grew up, and it was always it taught you something for every story the old people shared. It taught you a lesson. It taught you not to do things, and not to abuse people. Like he did sometimes. He was sometimes, they call him a trickster in some stories, He tricked people into, or his animal friends, he called everybody brother and sister. He had a relationship to everything. That's how he survived. He was kind of a lazy person. And this is true. The old people told you, don't be lazy because you'll end up like with Jack. You'll have to lie to survive. And so it taught us we had to be up and about and do the best for ourselves, because he wanted to just live off other animals or other family friends, as he called them. Yeah. So whenever you have questions, go ahead.
I don't think there's any yet, but part of what we're talking about this evening, we're going to talk a little bit about the teepee and how, like for me, that's where I got to hear all these stories is by helping my Kohkom make teepees, going into the bush, cutting teepee poles. I got to hear about, how she grew up, how she helped her parents and her grandparents, how she, like she tells a story about one of her Kohkoms was blind, and how, like, they just know what they're doing. Even though she was blind, she knew exactly how to clean the rabbit and all of those things. And so the muscle memory within, when you do something so many times. And so I got to like learn about that and hear about that. And her job, when she was younger, was to help the old people. And I think about, like when I was younger, I always had to help my Kohkom and Gramps all the time. Every weekend. Sometimes after school, it would be, all right, Kohkom and Gramps need help. Kohkom needs help with this. You're gonna go to her house, and that's how I got to hear all of these stories. And so that's how it was. Like she says, it was with doing work. It wasn't. We didn't sit down like we're doing right now and just like listen. It was never like that. It was like, we're canning, or we're picking berries, or we're sewing a teepee, or she's teaching me how to sew. Like when I learned how to sew moccasins, we'd be sitting there at the table with our tea, sometimes into the wee hours of the night, sewing whatever kind of orders we had. And that's when we got to hear those stories. And that's why that's how those things are passed down. It's through doing work, it's by and hands-on. And then you're going to remember that, when you create something or when you do something, you're going to remember that when you're maybe making bannock, or when you're cutting potatoes, you're going to remember that moment where you heard the story of whatever it is. Or you're going to remember, like when I sew, I remember when I asked how to learn how to make moccasins. I remember my Kohkom was sick and I got sent to her house to help. I'm sure I wasn't that much of a help. I was only like 9 or 10 years old. And I just said, I want to learn how to make moccasins. And so she sent me around the house, go grab this from here, go get a needle from here. That's the wrong kind of needle. Go grab this kind of needle, go get this thread, And so I had to go around the house and like almost like a little scavenger hunt, but get everything together so I can learn how to make moccasins. And she was sick. She had to sit in her chair. And so I had to bring everything to her and bring the little table and everything. And so then we sat there and we cut them out, and I would go and I would sew and I would bring them back to her, like, is this okay? And she would take it apart because it wasn't okay, because I was just learning. And so like I'm still just learning, and so she still takes apart my moccasins sometimes. But that's how we learn those things. And I think that like why we want to talk about that intergenerational understanding of how stories are passed down is because a lot of young people and a lot of families even forget about those kinship roles, and that's part of the TP teachings. Those kinship roles that you have, that grandchildren are supposed to spend time with their grandparents. They're supposed to work. They're supposed to help and not be lazy, and get up and do stuff and work and be active. But listen while they're listening, right? Like we're always listening. And I always ask my Kohkom so many questions. Like some of my cousins are ask me, how do you know that? And I'm like, well, I just always ask. Like I'm always asking more and more and more. I'm digging like a little detective. I want to know everything. I know all of how it works, and how all these things of how, we came to be and where we are in our life. And, even those answers of our family and all that kind of stuff, a lot of young people are afraid to ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. That's why I always say whenever I do something like this, ask. If you're curious, ask. We'll put tobacco down and we'll make sure that we do this in a good
I
way.
guess that's something we need to talk about is why do we offer tobacco? I was at the university today and students were asking, why do we offer tobacco? And they're in university, okay? They went through elementary, they went through high school. Nobody has ever taught them how important is tobacco for our Aboriginal people, for our young people to learn. Because my mother used to say, we have no ownership of nothing. In creation, we were the last created, the human being, she used to say. She didn't go to school. These were her teachings. She used to say we couldn't survive without air, water, food, food from Mother Earth. This is why it's kind of a thank you and a permission when we offer tobacco to pick berries. We offer tobacco to go cut teepee poles because we're taking something from Mother Earth and we're saying thank you for allowing me. And one thing is you only take what you need. You don't take more than you need unless you're going to share with others. So those were the teachings from the old people. We give thanks because she used to say we couldn't survive, not even 1 day or 2 days without everything created before us, she used to say. So I don't know, but those are her teachings. She was very calm, collective, never loud, never raised her voice. But that she would sit and talk, and then you listened. You had to listen for her because she didn't talk loud. She didn't raise her voice in anything. And then also the TP teachings for me are very important because my mother was a midwife, and this is kind of the birth of you look at a teepee, it's resembles a woman, and the life of a woman. And also, why do we put up a teepee closest to the ground? The canvas touches the ground to make that connection with Mother Earth, to make that. She said it's so important, And then again, why the fire in the middle? Because we're named after that fire as woman, because we are keepers of the lodge, the woman's lodge. And in our language, the Cree language, we're called Isquiu. The fire in our language, Isquotiu, Isquiute, the woman's heart. So those are very, very important teachings, And we'll never quit learning. That's what I was telling the students today. We're never done learning. I'm still learning. I listen to other people when they talk because there's different ways of knowing. Some people only learn from the book and it's okay, but some of us lived it. And I'm lucky I lived what I teach. I don't teach other people's teachings, how they do things, but I pass on also to my grandchildren, and hopefully that's how they'll remember, is by doing. That's just how the old people taught years ago. They didn't just tell you about it, they actually did it with you, showed you how and why it's done the way it's done. That was my mother's teaching. I'll show you, she said. You watched me enough times. Now it's your turn to make a teepee. Of course, the first teepee I made, it wasn't like hers at all. I made a round door. And she was so kind. She said, I don't see any round people walking around, do you? Because I made my door round. Today you'll see my doors, they're all oval. She said, we're like this. That's why my door is like this, oval. She said, we're not round people. So that was my harsh learning, that not to cut a round door when I make a teepee. And that's one of the first things you do when you make a teepee, is you cut that door and the top. And yeah, it's important to remember that. Well, I never forget that. Never will I ever forget that teaching. We're not round people, she said. So I know now we're like this.
Yeah.
Oval. Yeah. So some of the teachings she shared with me were still stuck in my head. Like I think I have shared my story with Jasmyn where I wanted to make a pair of gloves. Okay, she said, cut them, cut them. And each finger you sewed 3 times. And each finger you sewed because you put a piece in between. And I was so happy when I put them together, and we had to do them, pull them inside out with a little stick, you push every finger on inside out. Here I had sewed this piece backwards. So my fingers were like this. Instead of like this, they were like backwards. She looked at me with a smile, and I knew darn well I had to take it apart. She didn't have to tell me, just she never said, take it apart. But I knew right away when I looked at her. She just gave me a big smile, and I knew I had to take it apart. So I took them apart, and yeah, just this one, see how your fingers are? This is longer than this.
Yeah, there you go.
See?
Yeah.
See how your fingers are? See, this is longer than this. There's a piece of hide you cut that fits that. And I did it backwards. Try and make a pair of gloves someday. And when you look at a pair of gloves, when you buy them, there's that piece that goes in between your fingers here. You sew that backwards and your fingers are sticking out the wrong direction. So yeah, I learned. I never made many gloves after that. Boy, I always remember that. Never forgot. Never forgot. And my teepee, never forgot. Don't cut a round door. Cut an oval door. Some of those teachings were you only told once, but you'll never forget it. Hey, that's why the teachings years ago were more hands-on, because a lot of the old people didn't read or write. They taught by verbal and by showing things. Yeah.
By doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you say almost. You say almost. And then you look at me and I'm like, all right, I'll grab the scissors. We'll take these apart.
Almost perfect.
Yeah, almost perfect.
That's what I always said to the kids, when they did things. And if they didn't do them right, that's almost perfect, but could be a little better. Almost perfect.
But we're gonna take it apart and you're gonna redo it.
Take it apart.
No, you can't do it like this. No one wants their toes to be like that. And so you gotta take the moccasins apart and redo them. You didn't cut that right. You gotta fix that. No one has a heel that big. No one has a heel that small. You can make it bigger, but you can't make it smaller. So if you make that mistake a few too many times, you're gonna learn.
Yeah. You learn by doing. Yeah.
Those all. That was for me, that was always so special, and still is, because I'm still always learning. I'm like right now I'm trying to learn how to make a teepee, and I've made a few, but I'm not ready to do it on my own. And so I'm like, Kohkom, you need to be here with me. And like, she tries to walk away a little bit, like, whoa, like, what about this? And so I don't think some people really want to just do it on their own, but I'm definitely not one of those people. I just want to be
eventually she has
guided
to.
into that. Eventually I'll have to, but not until I have to.
Yeah, I'll have everything ready and I'll go on a holiday.
Don't you dare. But
that's how I had to learn. I had to learn because my mother said it time for you, and I'm glad she did, because I would have depended on her. I would have went and got her. I'd have done anything for her just to be there, just to say no, not that way. But I had to do it the hard way. I learned on my own. Sometimes I had to just sit and think, how did she do this? How did she actually? And I was lucky when I started making teepees. I had an industrial sewing machine. My mother sewed by hand. Okay, so I was quick at making mistakes, where she took her time, because we used to watch her sit these big sheets of canvas sew by hand, everything by hand. And I tell you, when I made a mistake, it was fast sewing and a sewing machine, but boy, you can make a mess too very fast. So yeah, so it's good to take time sometimes, no matter. That's what my mother always said too, even for life, sometimes it's good to stop. She said, stop, you're going too fast, going too fast. It's good to stop and sometimes take time to smell Mother Earth, and it makes a difference in your life. And I know because when I retired, I said, I'm not going to chase the clock anymore because that's all I did forever. Eh? It seems like I was always chasing the clock. Be on time, eh? And but no, every once in a while, I'm still chasing the clock.
You chased the clock today.
I fell asleep in my chair, eh? I told Jazz, I woke up and looked at the time and I said, oh my gosh, I gotta get going.
But she made it on time.
I did.
That's pretty good.
did.
Something woke you up. You were meant to be here. Yeah, there's lots of those things, you know, those stories that everyone talks about, you know, a lot of the stories that were taught, um, it was done in such a natural way. It was done in such a kind way too. Like, you know, even like to be corrected. I always like I've grown up in the city my whole life, and I have a lot of friends that are not Indigenous, and even adults, you know, I work with some adults, and to be corrected, they're so afraid of making those mistakes. But
It's good. You know, that's something too my mother said.
yeah,
If you never make mistakes in life, you don't know. You don't know. It's good to make mistakes and you know what not to do. If it teaches you a lesson, it's good. But sometimes some things they don't teach us a lesson.
sometimes you have to make the mistake
We'll
a few
do it over
times.
and over again. But that was her teaching. It's okay if you make a mistake. So when I used to have to get her to take her song apart, it was okay. It was okay. It was not a horrible thing that you have to tell people over and again, you did it wrong, you did it wrong. No, just take it apart and do it again, and it'll be good the second time, you know, and it usually is. It usually is. That's why the old people used to say, don't rush all the time. I was one of those people that loved to rush and get things done. And they used to say, no, take your time, don't rush, don't rush, don't rush. And I still do that once in a while. Only I can't move as fast now, so but my brain works.
Yeah, your brain's going faster than your
My
body
brain
can.
is going faster than my hands and my feet. I think I'm doing something, but I'm not.
That's just the world nowadays.
Yeah. And it's good, you know, whenever you, especially younger people, the teaching should be kids sit. You sit, it makes a difference. Say, don't put them on a chair. Take them into a teepee or take them to Mother Earth and let them sit on the ground. Because that's our greatest teacher is Mother Earth. You have difficult students, take them out someplace and sit on the ground with them and share stories with them. You're not the one teaching, it's Mother Earth teaching. That's again, I use that method, what my mother used to tell me. Sometimes I used to take students to Wanaskewin. We just go and sit on the hills and visit. We share whatever they wanted to share. But that sometimes it was our afternoon, we would do that. And it makes a whole lot of difference. You try and make a child sit on a chair, it really sometimes does not work. It does not work.
I still prefer sitting on the floor. I'm always that
That's
person.
why when I used to take my grandkids to the bush, this is where I used to sit. We used to take a break, I call it. We take a little break and sit and visit. Even when my grandsons were growing up, my oldest grandson, next time you go cut teepee poles, Kohkom, he said, I want to go with you. I want to hear your stories. Because I would take a thermos of tea and we'd sit out there and I'd tell stories, eh? And then they'd be laying there and on the ground listening because they'd be so played out. But that's the time to tell, to share those stories. Even berry picking time, eh? We sit we go and eat out there on the ground, and that's our break and our story time. Yeah. Doesn't always have to be stories, legends. It could be just everyday stories about happenings that happened. Uh, Kids like to hear that. What happened when you were a child? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was a child, it's very different than today. Very, very different. Very different. People took the time to tell stories to little ones, eh? People took, well, of course, they didn't work like we do today. A lot of us have to work for a living. Them days, it was the old people came and they were the ones that told stories at night. They could be life stories, they could be hunting stories. The old men used to be good at talking about their hunting stories. And the Kohkoms, they would talk about how many hides they did. They would talk about drying meat. And of course, that's how I grew up, eh? They talked about drying meat and making hide and putting away food for the winter. That was so important, eh? Teaching you how to survive, teaching you the methods of survival, I guess, was always. Those were their stories. Yeah.
The world is different now with how we have to work. Now we have to work away or busy work, right?
Yeah.
When you were younger, it was working, but it was for day-to-day survival.
Yeah.
You worked, you harvested animals and like meat and medicines and all that kind of stuff. And that even like I was really lucky that when I was younger that you got to work a job where you had the time to spend with us to tell us those things. You had your evenings and your weekends available, and summertime where we got to go into the bush and and it's funny because like now I tell my kids, I'm like, you're gonna be happy once we do it, you'll be happy doing it, but getting there is always the hard part.
Yeah.
And I remember like when I was younger too, getting ready to go to the bush, and it was on a weekend in the summertime, and I was like 15 years old. I didn't want to go to the bush, and so you try to think of every excuse, but there was no excuse that was going to get me out of going to the bush to get teepee poles. So and then she hyped me up, I need someone strong, and so I'm strong. And so she knew what she was doing. And then sometimes our cousins would like, I need someone that's fast, and my one cousin, I'm really fast, and so she'd run for the measuring tape. I'm really fast, and she'd run and grab it, and we're dashing through the bush, measuring the teepee poles, and I need someone that's got really good eyes, and so another cousin, it's me, I got good eyes, and they go run and look at this, look up, does that look like it's 25 feet? Does that look like it's 18 feet? Yeah, I think so, and we'd look, I'm about 5 feet, that's 3 of me, and so and we would look and measure, and she's so smart at like her strategies of like getting us, and then all of a sudden we've cut 2 sets and we're like, wow, she just pumped us up the whole time,
Yeah.
someone that's strong, someone fast, and we were just really into it. And
nobody likes work, so we don't
yeah.
call it work.
No, we gotta
No.
go do something, and
We're gonna work, we're gonna be together today. But one thing about I know through the years of working with youth is feeding them was so important. They love to eat and they love being looked after. As long as you do that, they'll do anything for you. They'll do anything for you. So even a couple, 3 weeks ago, before snow, I took the city police out to the bush, eh? And all just a male though, there were no women involved, just a male city police. I took them to the bush to teach them tobacco offering and to teach them how to cut a tree, like I did with my grandkids when they were way younger. They learned how to scale a tree and how tall it is. So we had fun. They worked hard, really hard, but we went and did a full day of work together. We went and ate out there, sat on the ground and ate, just like I did my grandkids, eh? And then they just loved it. Now they want to go back. Not in the snow. We're not going to go back in the snow.
No,
we're going to wait till spring and then we'll go again. Yeah.
And there was that understanding, of like the urgency sometimes of like, it's September, it's October, we need to get this done. We need to like clean out the garden, get all the potatoes out, and so we got to understand the urgency of those seasons, right?
Yeah.
And understand during that season, what are we going to do? And so, like, I think about now, I didn't think about it when I was younger, but I think about now, how in September, every weekend we were at Kohkom's house and we were in the garden and we were like picking vegetables and cleaning it out and making sure everything was ready. And it was always fun. It was never like a drag to go do it. It was just something that was fun. We got dirty, we got in the mud, and there was no complaints. And then now I understand why, is because now then it's gonna be winter, it's gonna freeze, and we need to get those vegetables. You need to take all the weeds out of the garden. You need to pick all the
Yeah.
roots out of the garden. Make sure
Even
it's
picking
good.
medicines, they're seasonal. How you
Mhm.
pick medicines, eh? How you pick your medicines, your sweetgrass, your sage. And my grandson and I went and we picked muskeg tea. There is a time for that where before snow comes, because it's way more potent muskeg tea, because it's in the fall. In the spring, it's not as strong, but later in the summer and the fall, it gets very strong. So we went and spent 2-3 hours in a bush and picked muskeg tea. Muskeg tea. There's time, and then the following week it snowed.
Yeah. And then you make
That's
up for
how,
it.
yeah.
You learn that, like, why, so like I was supposed to cut TP poles last fall, and I didn't get out there. And now I know this spring I'm gonna have to get out there. But all winter now it weighs on you. So you got to learn the urgency of like getting up, going to do it. Stop making excuses. I feel like right now we're get so comfortable in making excuses. I'll do it later. I'll do it later. Because so many things are so at our fingertips. We're so used to not having to chase down things or to respect that time that you have to get that item. Like right now we can get berries all year long, so we're not out picking those berries that we need. Like right now, how much I wish I would have picked more berries last summer. I wish I would have actually like picked like a good
I'm
amount.
not telling her I picked.
She did, I know.
See, the first berry you pick is usually the strawberry, in July. Right after that, raspberry. See, I picked every berry as it got ready. Then there were Saskatoons, Saskatoons. The last berry you pick in the fall is chokecherry. That's the last one. And then there's cranberries. If you want to pick the low bush cranberry, you gotta do it before. It can be a little frosty. It's okay with those, but you don't want to pick in the snow, so you try and pick them early in the fall. So every berry has a season, how you pick. So I used to start canning in July, August, and right till September, the end of September. And then the end of September is usually chokecherry time. That's when they ripen, September, October. And then you don't want to pick them too late if you're going to make jelly, because they don't gel as good. Stuff like that you learn as you go.
Yeah.
You used to wonder why the old people said, no, pick your berries on time. Yeah.
And respect that time. And that's something I'm learning now into my like young adulthood. I'm still young. Is those lessons, that I should have probably listened to you, but we didn't. And I was lazy. I was lazy last summer. I didn't go do the things that I was supposed to do, that I wanted to do.
Well, I did. I picked strawberries and raspberries. I put them in little bags and freeze them.
Yeah. We make up for it now in
They
the winter
taste
time.
so good in the winter time. But I can some stuff. Some stuff I freeze. But you can Saskatoons and you can blueberries. Oh my goodness, you open them in the winter time. They're so good. They're so good. So I went and I actually picked my own blueberries this year, till I tipped over my chair, and I had a heck of a time getting up. I had to sit in my lawn chair to pick the blueberries. Then I tipped over, and
that was the end of that.
I was scared of bears because I wouldn't be able to get up fast enough. But I made it.
Yes. good thing.
Yeah.
I know.
There's why things were done in season too. That was years ago. It was survival. And today we don't do enough for ourselves. So that's how come we have all kinds of sicknesses that sometimes we don't understand why we get sick so much all the time. Because we buy everything we eat, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, even taking care of yourself mentally, like it's such a medicine. Like the act of picking medicines is medicine. The
Yeah.
act of harvesting your own food, your own like animals or your own berries is medicine, to be out there to, like you say, go sit on Mother Earth and like I do that with my kids, and sometimes even I just need to go sit out and just sit down. And oftentimes if I'm outside or I'm at a park or something, I'm that person that's sitting down on the earth. Everyone's in their chairs and on their benches, and I'm like I just want to sit there and when you think about it, you think about the like when you went back with talk about tobacco, we went back to like offering that. When you really think about it, when you're outside, just like what a blessing it is, what a blessing and what a gift that we have, that we can go outside of our doors here in Canada and Saskatchewan, and we can go and we see trees, and we see, in some cities and in some places in the world, they don't see that. In some places like that, and even like in the far north, they don't see trees. Those trees are special teachers as well, and they can tell us so much about the weather and so much about what's going on in the world, what's going on that we don't understand sometimes. We see and we get from those trees, and even that's medicine, that we can go up and offer tobacco to those trees and to give thanks to those as well. And that's one of the things that's really big, really important for us, as Plains Cree people, and for many Indigenous people, is giving thanks. And that's why that tobacco teaching is so important, to remember to give thanks. Nothing should be taken for granted. All of those things can be gone tomorrow. So it's important to give thanks and to remember that where our role is in creation, where we stand in all of this is important too. So I always, I teach my kids now, to offer tobacco and to give thanks. And even sometimes when they're having a really hard time, I'm like, well, what are you thankful for? What's something that makes you happy? And it's usually like a toy or something, but that's where they're at in their minds right now. But like now I think about what makes me happy and what am I thankful for. And it's really such a good practice, and I grew up with my cook, like hearing my Kohkom talk about, when we give thanks, you got to think about what you're thankful for, and she always talked like so highly and so so special, so heartfelt about how she grew up. And some people would talk about how they grew up and it would all be negative. They just wouldn't want, they just so much negativity. But she talks about her childhood and her upbringing with such love and such a good thing. And that's why I think that like I have so much, when I talk about my childhood, and things that were important to me with my Kohkom is talked about with love, is because there was so much care put into all of it, even. And she never she never scolded us or anything like that. Like, not me anyways. She would never scold me. But she would correct me. But in such a kind way, and I've never heard her yell at anyone. Unless you're gonna get hurt, then she's like, whoa, 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 get down or get out of there. But there was never like a time where she would make us fear. There was no fear in how she raised us and how she cared for us. There was fear in disappointing you. Like I wouldn't bring her moccasins if I knew they were bad. If I looked at them and I'm like, oh, these are bad, I don't want her to see these, and then in my head, like, and I still do this, I'm like, if Kohkom knew that I was gonna do that, like, I can't. So like, there was that fear in that way, but never like afraid. And so I think that is so important in like in your relationships and in how you treat your kids and how you treat your your nieces and nephews and grandchildren, is everything the way you did it was with love, and love was first. And I feel like that's how your mom and your cookums and your aunts were also, you know, it was from a place of love. It was never, they didn't want you to feel ashamed of making, you know, the wrong shaped door or like this wrong or whatever you did in your life. You were never to be ashamed of it. It was, all right, now what did you learn from that, you know? And there's things that we're going to do in our life always that we're going to need to learn from. And I think that um that's one of the most special ways, and that's one of the most special things. Like, and we talk about the teepee, like one of those first doors is love. One of those first poles that create that the doorway is love. And so that was our home. Not only was it a ceremony, was it a shelter, but it was our home. And so every time you went in and out of that home, you were to feel that love. And so that's like the basis. And that's why, you know, when all of those things happen and our children were taken, all that love was taken away. And so now it's our job to bring back that love, bring back that caring and that heart into everything that we do. And everything my cookum does, I can tell she does it with love. You know, I talk about like sometimes I say I want to go have cookum's mashed potatoes because she makes them with love. And like, you know, and it's just they just taste so different. I don't know what she does, but like they're so different. And it's just they're made with love. You know, sometimes when and I do something wrong in my life, you know, like things I've done where I needed to learn a lesson, it was like I talk with my cousins and my siblings. I'm like, well, Cookum's gonna tell you with love. You know, she corrects you. That's how she loves you. She's gonna tell you not to do that, but that's how she loves you. And so, you know, we understand that. We knew that, and so, and we still know that. And so, I think that that's like such a powerful teaching, you know, is love. And it's so funny that this is February and the love month and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. that where this came back to for me in my head, you know, is that love that you have and that you were raised in and all of those kinds of things. So we've got 10 minutes. So does anyone have questions?
Yeah, please ask.
She's tired of me rambling.
Like we kind of went overtime at the university today, and I told the students, that's it, you can't ask questions now.
You're cut off.
You got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's good to hear people ask questions.
You could come on camera if you want, and ask it with your voice, or you could type it in the chat if you're shy. But
don't be shy. I used to stutter when I was younger, hey? And it was so hard for me to talk because I couldn't put two words together. But I grew out of it. I don't know how I did it. I think I swept it under the bed, I think, at one time.
Sometimes that's what it takes. We just have to convince ourselves that we're not shy and that it's okay, you know? So yeah, I have my chat open. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask, or any comments or things you're wondering. You got 10 minutes left of storytelling month, and you can't ask questions anymore after that. No, I'm just kidding. You still can ask questions. But
so they can.
I have a comment, less a question, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing. And I really appreciated what you were saying about it's okay to make mistakes. I'm going to take that forward with me. I'm a knitter, and I'm often having to take my things out, and it gets really frustrating. So thank you for sharing that. I think that was a really useful thing for me to hear tonight, especially.
Definitely.
It does.
And another thing my mother used to say, nobody is perfect. We can never be perfect. We can never be perfect. She said, if you make mistakes, then it shows you are human. That's how she kind of allowed us to, it's okay, but no, not to deliberately make mistakes, but accidentally, it kind of jars you, you know, even as a young person, you know, you just don't do it again.
And to do things with a good mind, like a good mindset, right? Like I always think about, like whenever I do anything, whenever I cook or make something, I always put my best into it. I always think about,
and that's her other teaching too. Don't ever cook in anger. You feed your children and yourself negative stuff, so you're going to process that in a negative way. That was her teaching. And always learn to befriend your children. Your children should never be afraid of you. She should never be afraid of. We definitely weren't afraid of her, you know. But when she spoke, we listened. because we knew she was our mother, and when she spoke, we listened. Although she was a tiny woman, but still.
So there's a question, is there a connection between tobacco offering and the TP teachings? Yes. So whenever we share TP teachings, we offer tobacco because those don't belong to us. You know, even for what we talk about today we were a little rushed. We didn't get to offer it first, but we'll go out and we'll offer it because a lot of what we shared, although some of it was personal stories, it comes from a teaching, right? There's basis, it's based on the teaching. And we always offer tobacco whenever we share TP teachings or any kind of
especially when
special
you talk
teachings.
about the legends we SaskTel.
Yeah.
Because he was a very strong spiritual being in our lives as Aboriginal people. Taught us many things, many things. To this day, we still talk about some of the things that he taught us. You know, so we offer tobacco because we used his teachings, his way of doing.
And I've even heard, you know, when you want to learn something, offer tobacco. You know, like let's say you want to set your mind and learn how to knit, or you want to learn your language, or you want to learn how to sew something. You know, you go out and you put tobacco down to give thanks for the day, to give thanks for what you're going to be learning, and also to ask that you do it in a good way. You know, that your intentions are good, they're pure when you do that. And so I always, you know, tobacco is such an important plant and such an important medicine that we've been gifted. You know, it was gifted to us for that purpose of reciprocation, you know, of gifting, of giving thanks. And so we remember that in all that we do, you know, always offer tobacco. And even if you're not sure if you should offer tobacco, offer tobacco. So it's better safe than sorry. But yeah, you know, sometimes people ask me like, should I give you tobacco? And I always say, if you feel like you should, you know, give tobacco. You know, if you feel like if it came to your mind, and then maybe you should give tobacco. And you're not giving us tobacco, you know, you're giving us tobacco for us to give it on your behalf, or for us to give it for whatever we're sharing. It's not for us to use and in a special way.
And you don't smoke,
No.
so yeah.
I always, you know, that tobacco is for medicines, it's for stories, it's for those kinds of things. It's to go back to Mother Earth. And so, you know, that's one of the 4 sacred plants that we were gifted as Plains Cree people. That's what we believe, you know. That's why I don't really like calling it stories. I call it teachings. You know, these are our ways of life that we share, that I was taught. You know, some of it's story, some of it's with a story, but a lot of it is our way of life. It's how we survived, it's how we live here, it's how we live in a good way, it's how we remember those natural laws. All of those things are incorporated in those stories. And so that's why I like to talk about it, and as it's a teaching, not just a story. Any more questions before we end our session here?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to as well just say thank you for sharing your teachings. And just a reminder, in watching the two of you interact together, the use of humor and bringing humor into conversations, and even correcting and lessons and stuff. It doesn't always have to be that disciplinary kind of thing that we often use within that colonial mindset. So thank you for the reminder of the use of humor and your teachings.
Thank you. We're always laughing. You can't take too much too seriously. It's one of our family things. But yeah, thank you so much to our people that are listening, and to those that asked questions or made comments. You know, it's always special to me when I get to share with my Kohkom, but also special that we get to be part of this and close off the month in this way, you know, with this visual of intergenerational storytelling.
Thank you so much for allowing me to sit with you. Although I don't see all of you, but it's still, to me, this is a new world.
It is different.
A new world. But I guess that's how it's got to be. It's got to be that way. I'm very accepting. I got COVID last year. I got COVID again this year. I got COVID about a week ago. I got over it. Been good. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Thank goodness.
So have a wonderful evening, all of you. and whoever participated. Yeah,